There's no denying Luke Ertel is the future at point guard, but with Omer Mayer still on the roster, will he have to wait another year to take the throne Braden Smith left?
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network where it's your team every day. As always, I'm your host. I am Nick Arvin. I'm talking Boilermakers every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the only daily Purdue show out there. And today we have an exciting episode because we're getting into our Luke Ertel preview. We've been doing a player preview each week. This week it comes down to Luke Ertel. And will it take another year for Ertel to take that throne that Braden Smith left, to be that point guard one? We'll find that out in the opening segment of today's episode. We'll then get into the positions ranked this year: center, power forward, small forward, shooting guard, and point guard. Which position is the best group right now? Which one is struggling? We'll end off today's episode continuing our week-to-week previews as we get into game week. Next week is game week for Purdue football. So today will be week 6, game 6 against Minnesota. Can Purdue get their first conference win against the Golden Gophers? So we're going to get right into the action today. And I want to start out talking basketball because it's been a couple episodes since we've had a basketball-centered one. A lot of football talk, as you would expect around this time of the year. But I've really enjoyed doing these player previews. I've really enjoyed it. And I know that we're still early, just August at this point. But I just love getting into the roster construction, how all of these different guys are going to operate. Position battles, of course, has been a huge topic of discussion whenever you get into this year's team. And I don't think there's a position battle or a conversation surrounding a potential position battle bigger than what you see at the point guard position. And it's Omer Mayer, it's Luke Ertel. That has been the conversation since Luke Ertel committed to Purdue and since the season ended last year for Omer Mayer. I mean, here's what you got. Let's just put it out in front, what you have with these two guys. Omer Mayer, ultra talented. We've known that for a while. We've known that since that FIBA U19 World Cup a couple of years back, where Omer Mayer really displayed for the world what he was going to be for Purdue, what kind of player he is, which is just a guy, when he has the ball in his hand, can make a play, can make a shot, excellent shot creator. But we saw last year against Big Ten teams in some of these conference games that maybe the game is a little bit fast right now for Omer Mayer. There were times where I felt like he was a bit indecisive. And yes, it is definitely hard. And this is going to be the big factor for Omer Mayer, is that Braden Smith was on the team last year. So we know that Omer is typically better with the ball in his hand. That wasn't the case a lot of time last year because Braden Smith commanded so much of the offense, but he was a little bit indecisive at times. I feel like he came off a little bit slow, and overall, the expectations we set for Omer Mayer last year were so high that I felt like it may have been difficult for him to achieve those expectations, which kind of leaves the taste in some Purdue fans' mouths, similar to myself, where it feels like maybe Omer Mayer didn't reach those expectations. Maybe Omer Mayer underperformed last year. Last season, he averaged right around 5.5 points per game, 1.2 assists. So definitely not anything groundbreaking. And then you bring in the flashy new toy. You bring in Luke Ertel this year, Mr. Indiana basketball in high school last season, brings Mount Vernon to their first state championship in school history. He is the guy now that Purdue fans view as how they viewed Omer Mayer last year, of that shiny new toy, that new point guard that's going to be the future after Braden Smith is gone. That conversation has moved from Omer Mayer being that guy now to Luke Ertel. And I do think there's reasons, and I think that there are good reasons for that conversation now to be surrounding Luke Ertel, because when you see what he does on the floor, he's not the biggest guy. He's a lefty, but he does similar things to Braden Smith. And this isn't me making a Braden Smith comparison saying he's going to be to the level Braden Smith was or that he's going to play like Braden Smith. I solely say this from the perspective of Luke Ertel is going to be the hardest playing player on the floor. We saw that in Canada. We've seen that over 4 years for Braden Smith. That is where the similarities start. Both of these guys are smaller, but they're going to be the hardest working players, not just on the court. Obviously, you see how Luke Ertel plays in that international tour to Canada, just Speedy Gonzalez out there, but off the court as well. When you're a smaller guy like that, especially at point guard, you have to work harder than everyone else because that's how you get your name out there. That's how you get that starting spot. And so far, everything that Matt Painter has said about Luke Ertel has implied or said that Luke Ertel is that guy. That Luke Ertel is that hardworking guy that's going to be someone as a freshman will have opportunities to play genuine minutes, genuine important minutes at the end of games or maybe even to start games. And then you look at Omer Mayer, who I thought to be fair, he did some good things in Canada. I thought he had a couple games where he showed that he has definitely progressed in terms of being more decisive with his decision-making, with being a little bit more in control of the game. I felt like last year the game just sped him up a little bit. But I also saw in Omer Mayer that in comparison to Luke Ertel, just looked a little bit slow out there. Just looked like he was a little bit of a step behind compared to what Luke Ertel was able to do on the floor. And this isn't supposed to be a segment, or this isn't supposed to be an episode. This is supposed to be a segment where we talk about Luke Ertel, what he's going to be for this team. But when you talk about Luke Ertel this year, that's going to go hand in hand with Omer Mayer. And that's just the reality of the situation. When you talk good about Luke Ertel, that implies that you're talking bad on Omer Mayer. And while I don't necessarily think that should be the case, it's such an interesting situation. It's such a, I don't want to say tough situation, but just a fragile situation for Omer Mayer right now and his future at Purdue, his future at point guard, because he's just a year older than Luke Ertel. You know, he is still a young guy, and he's still a player that you would want to be the future of your program if he doesn't end up going that NBA route. But Luke Ertel is hungry, and Luke Ertel is undeniable, and Luke Ertel did all the things that he did in Canada. So now you're in a situation where you have the young, hungry guy climbing up behind Omer Mayer, who's a year younger, looking for that starting spot, which for the record, I do think that he should earn that spot. I think that he is completely capable of overtaking Omer Mayer for that point guard spot this year. Does it happen? I'm not sure, but it puts Omer Mayer in a tricky situation because if Luke Ertel does become point guard one this year, well, then Omer Mayer is stuck. And you have Kevin Savage coming in 2027, which doesn't make things any easier or any lighter within that point guard group. So it's a tough situation for Omer Mayer, but Luke Ertel, he's playing with house money right now. If he doesn't get that starting spot, he's going to be that backup this year and still a guy that's going to play a ton of minutes. If he does get that starting spot, well, then we're going to start having conversations, much like I led out today's episode with is Luke Ertel the guy? Is Luke Ertel the heir to the throne that Braden Smith left at point guard? I think he is. I truly think Luke Ertel is that guy. And it's not just because of the things that he does that shows up on the box score. It's not just because of the eye test. Seeing him, I called him a rabid squirrel after those games against Canada. And if you watch those games, you know what I'm talking about because he just makes a play. And there's still some freshman things that you want to work out. Sometimes he tries to do a little bit too much. Will drive inside, pass out, and just there are some decisions that Luke Ertel will fine tune as he grows in his progression. But I want to see that on the floor. I don't want to see that coming off the bench. I want to see that effort, especially for a team where you're trying to figure out who is going to be that guy, who is going to be that effort player. If you can have that out of a freshman and as a point guard, that's exactly what this team needs. And I think Luke Ertel is exactly what Matt Painter needs. It's not just the playmaking ability. He's brilliant, was a quarterback in high school. He has the toughness. He has the ability to read the court, much like a quarterback reading the field and make good decisions. It's not just the scoring ability. He can shoot the ball really well. We saw that at Butler whenever he was in that three-point contest against collegiate teams, whenever he made some big shots in those games against Canada. It's the small things. It's his ability to have active hands on the defensive side of the ball. This is huge. It's his ability to rebound the ball as a smaller point guard. That's something people don't talk about. But for a team this year that seems like it could struggle in rebounding, having a point guard that is willing to crash the glass, having a point guard that is capable of putting up a triple-double, That is so rare to have, and that's something that Luke Ertel provides. So we look at Luke Ertel, and I will say he is the future at point guard for Purdue. But when you have that conversation about Luke Ertel and Omer Mayer as it pertains to this year, not going into the future, this year, everything Luke Ertel does, I think he's a little bit of a better defender. I think he's a little bit of a better playmaker. I think he's a little bit of a better rebounder. If you want to give Omer Mayer the scoring ability, you can do that. But there's plenty of scores on this team this year. I want a rabid squirrel in my starting lineup. That's what I want. I think Luke Ertel is that guy. Luke Ertel should be the starter. Will he be the starter? I'm leaning towards probably not. But once again, this isn't going to be a lineup, in my opinion, where it stays the same all year long. If Luke Ertel earns it, and if he earns it in the regular season, this could very well be Ertel's team going into the rest of this regular season after those first few non-con games. But we'll see how it all plays out. I certainly know that there are some position groups right now that we're certainly going to talk about in terms of these previews, and we're going to get into some of those coming up here next. I'm actually going to rank the positions, point guard through center, who's 1, who's 5. That's coming up here next on Locked On Boilermakers. Before the season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions. Who wins the division? Who makes the playoffs? Who's lifting the trophy at season's end? Well, on Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market. Right now is the perfect time to get in with Kalshi because Purdue to win the men's basketball national championship trading is right around 1%. And you know, Matt Pater teams always overachieve expectations. So you can sell that at any time and make a little bit of money on that trade because on Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house, and as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position, trade the draft pick, the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade 10. KALSHI. Kalshi. Trade on anything. 18 plus. Only restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Then contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. We're sticking with basketball here in the second segment of today's episode of Locked On Boilermakers, and now we're going to rank these positions, rank the groups as they stand right now for what they're going to look like. And once again, Enzo Sharvin still is a conversation, still up in the air, so it's going to be difficult to see how that power forward / center group is going to look as of right now without Sharvin. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to rank this assuming that Sharvin does not get cleared and that this is going to be the team without Sharvin, with the guys that are currently eligible to play. And we'll start right off, and I'm going to go 5 to 1 in terms of worst to first, worst to best within these positions. I think by far right now, the position with the most reason for concern, the most reason to be concerned is that center group. Right now, you're looking at Daniel Jacobsen and Raleigh Burgess at center. And I have my questions about Daniel Jacobsen. Out of the starters within the starting lineup, in the projected starting lineup, I have is Luke Ertel, CJ Cox, Ja'Cory Harris, Caden Pierce, and Daniel Jacobsen. Out of those 5, the one with the most concern I do have is Daniel Jacobsen, just because we don't know how well is he going to be able to rebound the ball. And that's kind of what I was getting to back with Luke Ertel, is that if your centers struggle to rebound the ball, you're going to have to find that rebounding in other spots. And right now, we just haven't seen that from Jacobsen. Obviously, he was the backup last year, so not as much volume as you're going to see from other centers, but only about 3 rebounds a game. And this year, with more volume, you need those numbers to come up. Towards the end of the season last year, we were in a situation where Daniel Jacobsen was tough to keep on the floor just because he didn't have enough strength on the inside to be able to compete and to bang up against some of these Big Ten solid caliber centers. And so that was really a defensive liability. On the offensive side, I want to see him get a little bit more fine-tuned with his footwork and not be a player that has to use your size to an advantage, because there are other 7-footers out there in the Big Ten, and there are 7-footers that are stronger than Daniel Jacobsen. So for what works against the University of Calgary, that might not work against the University of Illinois, if you know what I mean. So I'm concerned about Daniel Jacobsen and the starting lineup. I think that Raleigh Burgess could be a great piece and that versatile guy that could play either power forward or center. But as of right now, although I think he's going to have a good year, I don't think that he's good enough to start at center quite yet. Does that mean that he's better than Jacobsen? I don't know. I'm not sure how Jacobsen has been progressing throughout the offseason. I do know that there were still reasons for concern this year in Canada. So I'm not sold right now on this center group. I'm not sold that this is going to be a front court that is capable of getting this team to where they need to be. And it starts at the top with Daniel Jacobsen. I think Raleigh Burgess is a nice piece, but is he good enough as of right now to take on that role? I really don't think so. So the center group is going to be number 5 for me. At number 4, we're staying in the front court. It's going to be that power forward position. And of course, I think that Caden Pierce was a good addition to this team, an addition that needed to happen. You needed to fill that spot with some type of transfer. And Caden Pierce, Ivy League Player of the Year 2 years back at Princeton, took a step back, or I guess it would have been 3 years now, took a step back 2 years ago, less productive. And then last season ended up not playing basketball to save his final year of eligibility. Caden Pierce, athletic as can be, can get to the rim. We saw that in Canada, but just doesn't have the height. 6'6". Can he rebound? And a similar conversation to Daniel Jacobsen. And this is what Matt Painter has said was his biggest concern, is just the ability to rebound within that front court. I see it with these two guys, and I don't know how that's going to fare within the starting lineup if it does end up being Caden Pierce and Daniel Jacobsen. Now, the reason I think that this power forward group is going to be a little bit more consistent than what you're going to see at center is because you do have options and you have different looks that you can throw out. Now, you have Caden Pierce, who is athletic, probably the best offensive scorer in terms of getting the ball inside out of the power forwards on this team, but you also have Jack Benner, who you could play at power forward and who started in that first game in Canada. 3-and-D guys going to continue to progress. I love Jack Benner. And then you have Raleigh Burgess, who could also potentially get some reps at power forward. Maybe run a Raleigh Burgess, Daniel Jacobsen front court and play with a lot of size. I think there are more options this year at power forward, which is why it's a little bit higher for me. But in totality, that front court is pretty concerning as of right now. So center at 5, power forward at 4, the third best group, or kind of that group in the middle. We're just going to make our way down because I think it's that let me go point guard. And let me tell you why. I'm between small forward and point guard here at number 3. But much like the power forward position, I think that you have more options at small forward than what you do at point guard. I made a whole first segment about why I think Luke Ertel is that guy, why I think he's the future of Purdue at point guard. And I think Omer Mayer is perfectly capable of fitting into some type of role this year, whether that's a starter, whether that's a closer, whether that's just a guy that comes off the bench and is able to play good basketball and provide you some scoring. Both of those players are completely capable and going to be great point guards for the next couple of years or going forward into that time. But I just want to see how these guys go. There are a lot of question marks, and I'll put it that way. I think there are more question marks right now at point guard than there are on the wings. And that's just because we haven't seen Luke Ertel play against a Big Ten team. We've seen Omer Mayer last year, but can he take that jump into his sophomore year? Both those guys talented, but more question marks than at small forward. And that group comes in at number 2 for me because you have Jakari Harris. You have the ability to move Jack Benner over potentially to that small forward spot. I think Jacob Weber, whether he fits in at shooting guard or small forward, I think he's a guy that's completely capable of getting some time, maybe not a lot, but cracking the rotation a little bit this year. And then the big X factor that everyone talks about is Antoine West. And I view him more as that shooting guard type of guy, but I could see situations where you run out a smaller lineup with those guards. I don't think that's the most beneficial lineup for Purdue to run, but I could see it. Ultimately, I think Jakari Harris will end up taking that jump this year and starting at the small forward spot, but you still have plenty of options behind Jakari, which is why this small forward group comes in at number 2. And the best group this year for Purdue, in my opinion, I think this is pretty clear, is that shooting guard position, because you have CJ Cox, the lone returning starter from last year's team, is still going to be that great on-ball defender, that point of attack defender, and just going to be a guy that in late moments of games has that clutch gene. You now have Antoine West, who I view as a shooting guard and as a player that can just score the ball. He's not the flashiest player in the world, but he can just get a bucket. A great shot creator is what Antoine West features. Then you have your other options. You have Jacob Weber, who could potentially come over to that position as well. I think pound for pound, shooting guard is the best spot on the floor for Purdue. And that's when the question marks start to come in, is how do you get all of these guys involved? How do you fit Antoine West, Ja'Cory Harris, and CJ Cox into a lineup together? Does CJ Cox move over to point guard? Does that leave one of Omer Mayer and Luke Ertel out of the starting lineup? Do you get all of these guys involved, or do you have to make a choice? Is it CJ? Is it Antoine West, or do you go small and run CJ and Antoine West? There are a ton of questions, and I think that's a good thing to have right now, because that top three caliber of these wings, Antoine West, CJ Cox, and Ja'Cory Harris, all guys that are extremely capable of producing in big-time games. And that's what I want to see this year for Purdue, is I want to see these guys take a step up, especially now with the new 5-5 eligibility, where you're going to have 3 more years of CJ and Ja'Cory Harris. You're going to have 4 years of Antoine West. So this is the future of this program, and these guys are already capable. So I want to see how well they progress over the season, but shooting guard, pound for pound, for me, has to be number one on this team. But coming up here next to end off today's episode of Locked On Boilermakers, we will be previewing Week 6, Game 6, our 6th preview in the series that's coming up here next on Locked On Boilermakers. But first, running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them seem to talk to each other. Well, that's where Odoo comes in, because Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place. Odoo is one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business, because the best organizations know that success isn't just about talent, it's about having everyone working toward the same goal. And that's true in sports just like it is in business. And that's why Purdue football needs to take something from Odoo. From the athletic department to the players to the coaches, everybody needs to work together, because great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Game 6 of our preview series, and a game for Purdue, which I think is extremely important for the overall trajectory of this season, how the year is going to play out, is Week 6 against Minnesota, against the Golden Gophers. And last year, that was a game with a lot of disappointment. Last year, Purdue led 20-13 heading into the fourth quarter, up by 7, and then the interceptions start to come. Ryan Brown threw a bad one at the end of that game that helped Minnesota win that one, and that was a game that Purdue should have won, was leading for a good portion of the game. Ryan Brown threw 2 interceptions, and Devin Mockabee threw an interception in that game last year. What we're going to see this season for Minnesota is going to be pretty similar to what they featured last year, at least at the top. Drake Lindsey is back for another year at quarterback for Minnesota. Darius Taylor is back for another year at Minnesota at running back. Now, with that being said, it's going to be interesting to see how Minnesota plays out this year, how this team looks, because I've seen from some sources, people are saying this is going to be a college football playoff team, very similar to Wake Forest, where there's some people with just some wild expectations towards Minnesota. Then on the other side of the coin, you see people saying, no, Minnesota, they're going to come down to earth. This isn't going to be a team that's going to overexceed expectations. It's going to be that standard PJ Flex 7-5 squad. And ESPN is one of those sources, I suppose, because they actually have Purdue winning this game against Minnesota. 52% for Purdue in the ESPN predictor, matchup predictor. And this is a game I also have Purdue beating Minnesota. And let me tell you why. Number one, I don't think the turnovers are going to be an issue the way that they were last year. I don't see, number one, I don't see our running back throwing an interception this year. Number two, I don't see Ryan Brown throwing 2 interceptions, much less a late game, give the game away interception the way that he did last year when they played Minnesota. The Minnesota defense, they can rush the quarterback pretty good, but I would say that running defense or stopping the run will be a little bit of a concern this year for Minnesota, and that works pretty well into Purdue's hand because you have that attack of Jarrett Gibson, you have that attack of Fame Joby. If you have those two guys operating at a high level, it should give Ryan Brown more opportunities to take care of that football. And that's been a key theme of this team, previewing this team for quite a while. But I don't think there's a game with more importance with that than against Minnesota, because say what you want about Minnesota's offense. There are people saying that this Minnesota offense is going to have a ton of firepower. I'll believe it when I see it. I think Drake Lindsay is a good quarterback. He's solid. I think that Darius Taylor, when he has a good game, can be really, really good. But last year, I mean, Purdue pretty well, and this was a bad Purdue defense, had Darius Taylor down to just 2.3 yards per carry on 14 carries. Drake Lindsay had 232 yards, but 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. You'll take those numbers any day, and those are numbers where you're going to be able to beat a team if their starting quarterback and their starting running back put up those type of numbers. This year, Minnesota's offensive line is a lot better, a lot more experienced. They've got a Tennessee transfer who comes in. And so we'll see how that plays out with the offensive line. I think the offense will be a better group this year for Minnesota. But on the other hand, I do think the defense could be a little bit of a worse group this year for Minnesota, which works well into Purdue's hand because I expect the defense to be a lot better this year for Purdue under Kevin Kane. So ultimately, the way I see this game working out, it's similar to last year from the standpoint of it's not going to be, there's going to be some scoring in this game. I expect both teams to probably hit either the upper teens going into the 20s, maybe 21 to 14, 21, 17, 28, 21 tight game, that type of range. But this year, I think that Purdue is a much better team. And this game's at home in Ross-Ade, which sticks with the themes of, winnable games at home in Ross-Ade. You got Wake Forest at home, Indiana State at home, you got Minnesota at home. Those are winnable games. This, in my opinion, will be the first conference win for Purdue in over 2 years, which is crazy to say. Maybe Minnesota just really overperforms. Maybe Minnesota is that team that people claim them to be, a college football playoff team. But to be honest with you, they retain some key guys, but I don't see them taking a huge jump from where they were last year. And once again, Purdue had this team on the ropes away with a much worse Boilermakers squad. So this year, I do think Barry Odom ends up getting PJ Fleck's number. I think that the Purdue Boilermakers knock off Minnesota. We'll see how it plays out in week 6, but this is once again a game that is very winnable for Purdue and a game that could define the Boilermakers season. I can't wait for Purdue football. Just under 2 weeks away now. Game week is next week. I am pumped. I can't believe we are finally here. So thank you guys for watching another episode of Locked On Boilermakers. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment. All that really helps out a ton as we want to continue growing the channel. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure you leave 5-star, whatever your preferred podcast listening platform is. Make sure you leave 5-star on there. That also really helps grow the show. So that's all I got for you guys today. But until tomorrow, as always, boiler up, hammer down.